Hello, my name is Eric, and I am your Lord Commander. Welcome. A cold wind howls through the trees. A shiver stops you in your tracks. Looking back over your shoulder, you see the last glimmers of sunlight through the swaying canopy. Ahead, twisted branches tremble and writhe. An unholy green haze unfurls before you. Glancing down at the mire, you are sure the path ahead is trapped. A small iron token reflects against the mud. You take pause and proceed with caution. Without a doubt, Baldur's Gate 3 has been taking the gaming world by storm, and I've been loving every minute I get to spend playing it. Well, mostly every minute. Either way, this game really has me inspired to try and bring some of the iconic characters to life. So come along with me while I paint one of those very special characters with you today. And no, it's not Asterion, Karlach, or everyone's boo thing, Shadowheart. No, today we will be painting the hag, Auntie Ethel.
I'll keep you alive until I've sucked the marrow from your bones. And then I'll bring you back and do it all over again.
I feel it is no better time than now to paint this lovely and completely trustworthy Annis hag from Wizards of the Coast, Nolzur's miniature line. I love the storyline, cutscenes, and scenery when you encounter Auntie Ethel in the sunlit wetlands. They really captured that malevolent and cruel feeling you would get when having to deal with a hag. Running with that inspiration, I pulled out my box of holding. My box of shame. Still fresh from my latest quick save, I sat down in the studio and began the process of bringing this unforgivably ugly being to life. Let's get started. Picking out the colors for the model, I wanted to go with a dark greenish blue like the Annis hag from Volo's Guide. Starting with Elysian green from Games Workshop, I began working my way around the model, making sure to cover all areas of the skin. I'm not worrying about being accurate as I know the adjacent areas will get covered later. I'm thinning my paint down on a wet palette and working in 2 thin coats. Next, I got some Desolate Brown from Army Painter and began working it into the recesses and all over the skin. I want to create shadows and tinting. I make sure to let this coat dry before painting on the next layer. I don't want to remove any of the speed paint in this coat. After that, I took some Army Painter Age hide and worked it all over the skirt portion of her smock. I'm going for that fleshy, poorly tanned and dried hide look. Hags frequently use the flesh of their victims to create crude and supple leather. Next, I used some Xandri dust and 2 thin coats over the apron and blouse areas. My goal is to give this portion of her clothing a slight differentiation from the skirt. Perhaps it's from some older victim and the hag's tanning process has evolved. We'll see how this experiment turns out as we add more colors to the model. Moving on to the highlights for her skin, I used some thinned down Krieg khaki on just the high portion of the muscles, making sure to avoid the recesses. I don't want to mess up that shadow we already created. Using this lighter color for the highlights will help later on in the process when I bring the skin color all together with a wash. Following that, I grabbed some dark wood by Army Painter and slathered a coat over the twig belt and her vineyard bracers. I wanted the focal point to be on her skin, so I'll leave these at 2 coats and call them done. Now for the skulls, my favorite go-to for bones is Ushabti Bone by Games Workshop. So I carefully painted the 3 skulls in 2 thin coats, making sure not to get any on the skin that is already painted. Next, I switched back to using dark wood again, and I painted around the base of the model. I'm just quickly slapping this on using a large brush. I know we'll be covering this later with basing material, so no need to be extra careful. I'm just going to have fun with it, and in the end, I felt 2 coats gave me the best results. So now we're going to move on to the next step. So back to Yushabti Bone again, and I painted her teeth. Later I give the teeth a wash of Seraphim Sepia, just to kind of give it that unclean dental look. Now hags in their true form have black beady eyes, so naturally I went with some white scar and a bat in black using my fine detail brush, and I dabbed some eyes and moved on. I'm loving the progress so far and am ready to move on to those fun and technical parts of miniature painting, which is all the small details and tricks we use to bring the fun models to life. Now it's time for some dry brushing. I grabbed my medium dry brush from Army Painter, my dabbing sponge, and homemade dry palette. I add paint to a very lightly dampened brush and I work it off on the palette until I get the coverage I want. I worked in circles all around the skirt and apron area, and I'm using Xandri Dust again here to bring up that tan color. I'm hoping that it gives me that flesh leather effect over the red blood-stained hide. I'm envisioning that poorly dried and maintained look. I really doubt hags have sophisticated methods in their leather making. And what miniature would be complete without some Agrax Earthshade? So I thinned some down just a little and began working it around the base of the skirt. I want to give it that muddy and kind of uncleaned look. I also added some to the horns of the skull so they didn't appear flat. Now it's time for my big experimental change here. I'm using an old synthetic brush and I took out some Drakenhof Nightshade to cover her skin. What I'm hoping to achieve is this otherworldly deep blue-green, just something nasty and unnatural. I did not thin this down either. I wanted to get a full tinting effect, especially over the portions painted early with our Creep Khaki. I ended up doing 2 coats as the desolate brown that we used earlier ended up being very dark and was preventing the Drakenhof from standing out. But hey, that's the fun part of the hobby, is experimenting and learning new ways of achieving our vision. It came out close to what I had in mind. It's a little dark, but I think it looks fine. So in all the work needed to complete the model and video, I missed filming painting her hair. Hey, live and learn. So I used some Army Painter Gravelord Gray in 2 coats, and now she's looking like a proper old lady. Alright, so here comes the fun stuff, basing the model. Now this is the step where the miniature really comes to life and you can see it in its environment, which gives that mini that extra punch. So using an old synthetic value brush, I worked some Pro Acryl Dark Earth texture all around the base of the model. I'm not going too thick here as we don't want it to appear as if she's coming out of the mud. We want her to look as if she's moving through it. So I added small mounts to the base of the skirt to really sell that look as if she's moving through the environment. Next, I got out a few Army Painter tufts. I placed 3 around the base in no particular pattern. I used 2 small and 1 medium for variance. Next, I sprinkled some Army Painter Fieldgrass for some detail, and finished with 3 small river rocks from Woodland Scenics. I really wanted to get that extra flare look, so I took a round blender brush and dabbed some dark earth soil works around our mud to give it the dry areas. I wanted it to look as if the mud had been cracking with little bits of sunshine that shone through the trees. Now hags are repulsed and loathe anything beautiful. They revel in their own ugliness. They purposely scratch and pick their bulbous skin. So what better way to up the ick on this lovely lady, I thought. So let's shade her boils with some Iandin Yellow contrast paint from Games Workshop. Now I'm only painting the highest and most boilless spots on her skin. I'm using the yellow as a glaze, just enough to change the coloring. And now to really punch up that contrast and show off those glorious blemishes, I mixed the Iandin Yellow with some white scar and hit only the highest points where the light would hit. How's that for some pus-filled boils, huh? Now, after spending a little bit of time drawing, our Auntie Ethel is complete. And if you made it all the way to the end, I want to thank you so much for watching. Please take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel for any future content, and if you have technical questions, feel free to add them to the comments below. It really was enjoyable to paint this model with you all today, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I hope you learned a little bit about hags and D&D in general. Now I will have more Baldur's Gate 3 content in the works, so look out for those in the future, and take care. It's water.